Don't give up. Not now. Not after everything you've imagined, everything you've felt, everything you've quietly believed when no one else could see it. If you are listening to this, it is not by accident. You are not weak for wanting them, you are not foolish for still loving them, and you are not wrong for believing that what you desire is already yours. The only thing that ever stood between you and your specific person was never distance, silence, time, or circumstances. It was never another person. It was never what they said or didn't say. It has always been a state of consciousness, and states can change instantly. You must understand this deeply now. Nothing is lost, nothing has gone wrong, nothing needs to be fixed in the outer world. What you are experiencing is simply the echo of old assumptions playing themselves out. And echoes fade when the sound that created them stops. You don't chase echoes, you change the source, you change the inner story, and the world has no choice but to rearrange itself to match it. You may feel tired, you may feel like you've done everything right and still nothing moved, but effort has never been the key, strain has never been the requirement. Love was never meant to feel like a battlefield. The moment you stop fighting reality and instead assume a new one, reality follows. It always has. It always will. Because the world you see is not the cause, it is the effect. Right now, you are being asked to do the simplest yet most powerful thing you will ever do. Stopped telling the story of loss. Stopped repeating the moment they left, the message they didn't send, the distance you think exists between you. Those moments have no power unless you keep revisiting them. You don't manifest what you want, you manifest what you accept as true. And if you keep accepting the version where you are unwanted, unseen, or forgotten, that is the version that keeps showing up. But listen carefully. Desire does not come from emptiness, it comes from alignment. You would not want them this deeply if they were not already connected to you on a level far beyond the physical. You would not feel this pull if it were not already real within you. Consciousness does not tease, it reveals. The longing you feel is not absence, it is recognition. You are not waiting for them to change, you are allowing yourself to return to the version of you who knows they are chosen, the version of you who does not wonder if they are loved, because love is assumed, the version of you who does not look for proof, because proof follows assumption, not the other way around. Think about this. Every loving moment you want from them already exists as a possibility, ready to crystallize into form the moment you occupy the state of being the one who is loved. You don't need to convince them, you don't need to reach out. You don't need to do anything in the outer world. Movement always starts inward. Always. Right now, you are being invited to stop asking, why hasn't it happened yet? And start declaring, it is done. Time is not the issue. Delay is not punishment. Delay simply means you've been looking at the shadow instead of the source. The moment you stop measuring, checking, and waiting, you collapse time. The moment you rest in certainty, reality rushes to catch up. Your specific person has no free will to resist the state you consistently occupy. Not because they are controlled, but because everyone plays the role assigned to them by your assumptions. When you assume you are prioritized, you are. When you assume you are cherished, you are. When you assume you are unforgettable, you become impossible to ignore. Ask yourself honestly, who are you being when you think of them? Are you the one hoping or the one remembering? Are you the one wishing or the one knowing? Hope keeps things distant. Knowing brings them close. The version of you who already has them does not wait by the phone. That version feels calm, secure, grounded. That version doesn't give up because there is nothing to give up on. Let this sink in. Giving up is not about letting go of them. It is about letting go of the old self who believed they could lose love. You are not meant to abandon desire. You are meant to abandon doubt. The desire is sacred. The doubt is optional. Right now, imagine how you would breathe if you knew with certainty that it was already done. Notice how your shoulders would drop. Notice how the tension would dissolve. That feeling is not fantasy. It is a preview. It is the state you are meant to live in now, not later. You don't wait for peace after manifestation. Peace is the manifestation. Stop checking the outer world for confirmation. The outer world is delayed data. It only shows you what you believed yesterday. If you want to see something new, Believe something new now. Not forcefully, not desperately, gently, naturally, like remembering something you already know. They are thinking of you more than you realize. They feel the pull even if they don't yet understand it. They are being rearranged internally to meet the version of you who no longer doubts their worth. You don't need to visualize endlessly. You don't need techniques stacked on techniques. You need one decision to assume the end. Assume they want you. Assume they miss you. Assume you are the one they compare everyone else to. Assume conversations unfold easily. Assume reconciliation feels natural, not dramatic. Because love does not arrive with chaos, it arrives with recognition. If you are on the edge of giving up, it means you are closer than ever. Resistance always spikes before release. The old story fights to survive right before it dissolves. Don't mistake that discomfort for failure. It is evidence of change. Let the old version of you die quietly, the one who waited, the one who begged internally, the one who wondered if they were enough. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to explain it. You simply stop returning to that state. And when you stop returning, it cannot follow you from this moment on. You move as someone who is loved. You think as someone who is chosen. You feel as someone who is secure. And you allow the world to do what it always does when faced with certainty: conform. You don't give up now. You don't walk away from what is already unfolding. You don't quit at the point where the unseen has already shifted. You stand still internally and let the bridge of events carry you without effort. This is not about forcing a person. This is about allowing the version of reality that already belongs to you. And once you see that, truly see it, you will realize there was never anything to chase, never anything to fix, never anything to fear. It was always yours, and it still is. You don't need to arrive at some dramatic ending in your mind. You don't need closure. You don't need a final sign. What you need right now is steadiness, persistence in a new inner posture. Because the moment you stop reacting, everything starts responding. Understand this clearly: when nothing seems to be happening, if everything is happening, the unseen always moves first. The inner decision is always ahead of the outer display. You don't pull the seed out of the soil every day to check if it's growing. You let it be. And that is exactly what is being asked of you now. Stop replaying conversations that hurt you. Stop imagining scenarios where you are rejected, ignored, or replaced. Those scenes are habits, not truths. And habits dissolve when they are no longer fed. You don't fight them, you don't argue with them. You simply choose again, every time, calmly, gently, firmly. Whenever their name comes into your mind, don't let it trigger longing or sadness. Let it trigger familiarity. Let it feel normal. Let it feel obvious. Say inwardly, of course, this is already mine, not with intensity, not with desperation, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows the ending. You are not here to convince the universe. The universe has already agreed. You are here to convince yourself to stop wavering, because wavering creates mixed signals, and mixed signals slow things down. Certainty speeds everything up. Notice how much energy you've been giving to the idea of what if it doesn't work. That thought has never protected you. It has never saved you from pain. It has only kept you in limbo. You don't need protection from love. You need permission to receive it. There is a version of you who wakes up without checking their phone, not because they don't care, but because they feel secure. There is a version of you who smiles when they think of them, not because they miss them, but because connection feels constant. That version of you already exists, and you can step into that state now without waiting for anything to happen outside. You don't manifest by effort. You manifest by identity. Ask yourself, who would I be if this was already done? And then be that. Not tomorrow, not after. Are a sign. Now walk differently, think differently, speak differently to yourself. Stop telling yourself this is taking too long. Time stretches when you watch it. Time collapses when you let go of monitoring. The moment you stop counting days, the days count themselves. You may notice moments where doubt creeps back in. That doesn't mean you failed. It means the old story is trying to return. And every time it does, you simply refuse to entertain it. You don't suppress it, you don't analyze it, you replace it. You say inwardly, that is no longer who I am, and you move on. There is nothing fragile about this process. Love is not fragile. Consciousness is not fragile. What feels fragile is the old identity dissolving, and that discomfort is temporary. The peace that follows is permanent. You don't need to worry about how it will happen. You don't need to imagine every step. The bridge of events organizes itself automatically. You will say the right thing at the right time, or you won't need to say anything at all. They will reach out, or circumstances will align effortlessly. It will feel natural. It will feel obvious. It will not feel forced. That is how you know it is real. Right now, let yourself rest in the assumption that you are already chosen. Let that be the background of your thoughts. Let it be the foundation you stand on. And whenever your mind tries to pull you back into old pain, remind yourself gently that chapter is complete. I don't live there anymore. You are not hoping anymore. You are remembering. You are not waiting anymore. You are allowing. You are not trying anymore. You are being, and from this state, everything rearranges. Continue to hold this inner stillness. Continue to move through your days without urgency. Continue to let certainty replace effort. Because the moment you truly stop trying to make it happen is the moment it happens, not because you gave up, but because you finally assumed it was already done. Let the feeling of completion stay with you without turning it into a final statement. There is no finish line you need to cross. This is a way of being you return to again and again until it feels so natural that you forget you ever lived any other way. When thoughts arise that ask, "Where is it?" don't answer them. Questions keep you in seeking. Silence keeps you in knowing. The moment you stop answering the mind's doubts, they lose their authority. They fade because they are no longer entertained. You may notice that your emotional reactions begin to soften. What once triggered anxiety now feels distant. What once felt urgent now feels neutral. This is not detachment from love. This is attachment dissolving. And when attachment dissolves, love flows freely. The old version of you believed love had conditions, that it could be withdrawn, that it depended on timing, mood, or circumstance. But the deeper truth is simpler. What you assume to be true about yourself must be reflected back to you. If you assume you are easy to love, you become that experience everywhere. Notice how the body responds when you stop forcing. Breathing slows, thoughts settle. There is space. That space is where everything rearranges itself, not through effort, but through allowance. If memories from the past try to replay themselves, let them pass like clouds. They have already served their purpose. They showed you what you no longer want to identify with. You don't need to heal them. You don't need to understand them. You simply stop giving them your name. There is no separation between you and your desire, except the idea that there is. The moment you stop affirming separation, it collapses. Connection is not created, it is revealed. Every time you choose calm over panic, certainty over fear, ing over hoping, you shift the state, and states determine outcomes. Not effort, not logic, not struggle. You don't need to watch signs. You don't need to analyze their behavior. You don't need to read meaning into silence. Silence is neutral until you give it a story. Choose a story that serves you. The one who is loved does not need reassurance. The one who is chosen does not need validation. Begin to treat yourself as that person now. Speak to yourself kindly. Move through your life with dignity. Let your inner conversations reflect the relationship you are assuming. This is not pretending. This is remembering who you are. The world responds to identity, not to wishful thinking. You may find moments where you forget entirely about them. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped worrying. Those moments are powerful. They signal alignment. They show that you are no longer grasping. Nothing is being taken away from you in those moments. Everything is being prepared. The inner shift always comes before the outer confirmation. And once the shift is complete, the confirmation is inevitable. Not because you demanded it, but because there is no alternative. Remain in this quiet confidence. Let it become familiar. Let it become your default. You don't rush it. You don't announce it. You live it. And as you do, the old story continues to dissolve moment by moment, assumption by assumption, without drama, without effort, without the need for an ending. Allow this to keep unfolding without trying to wrap it up in your mind. The moment you look for an ending, the mind tries to step back into control. This is not something you control. This is something you remain faithful to. Faith here is not blind belief. It is loyalty to an inner knowing. It is choosing the version of yourself who does not collapse emotionally every time the outer world feels quiet. Silence no longer means absence. Silence means rearrangement. You begin to realize that nothing outside of you ever had power over your emotional state unless you handed it over. And now, slowly, gently, you take that power back, not by resisting reality, but by redefining it internally. You don't argue with circumstances anymore. You don't try to outthink them. You simply refuse to let them define you. Circumstances are temporary, states are primary. When you stay loyal to the state, circumstances bow. There may be moments when the desire feels distant, almost irrelevant. This does not mean it is fading. It means your sense of fulfillment is no longer dependent on its appearance. And paradoxically, that is when things move fastest. The one who knows does not cling. The one who knows does not panic. The one who knows does not need reminders. Knowing is quiet. It does not announce itself, it settles. You start to notice how often the mind used to reach for reasons, timelines, explanations. Now those questions feel unnecessary. You don't need to know how it will happen. You only need to know who you are. And who you are is not someone waiting to be chosen. Every inner conversation begins to change naturally. Instead of wondering what they're doing, you assume familiarity. Instead of replaying old pain, you default to ease. Instead of imagining distance, you sense closeness without effort. This is not discipline, this is alignment. When old doubts try to surface, they feel weak, almost foreign. You recognize them as remnants of a state you no longer occupy. They don't scare you anymore. They don't convince you anymore. They pass. You don't rush to replace them with affirmations. You don't fight them with force. Your calm certainty is enough to dissolve them. You begin to trust yourself again. And that trust is what changes everything. Because when you trust yourself, you trust life. When you trust life, you stop interfering. And when you stop interfering, the natural order restores itself. There is a rhythm to this process. Some days feel deeply settled. Some days feel neutral. Some days feel reflective. None of them mean you are off track. They all belong. You stop assigning meaning to emotional fluctuations. You stop labeling days as good or bad. You stop measuring progress. Measurement implies distance. You are no longer distant from what you desire. Everything now is happening from within outward, quietly, invisibly, inevitably, and you remain here, steady, present, grounded in the assumption that nothing is missing, nothing is broken, and nothing needs to be forced, allowing the unfolding to continue without demanding an ending. Stay with this sense of inner neutrality because neutrality is not indifference, it is mastery. It is the place where emotions no longer drag you back into old identities. You are not suppressing feeling, you are no longer being ruled by it. You may notice that thoughts about them come and go without intensity. They no longer spike your nervous system. They no longer demand action. They simply pass through awareness like familiar music in the background. This is not loss of desire. This is desire purified of fear. Fear was never love. Fear was attachment to an outcome. And as fear dissolves, love becomes calm, expansive, and unquestioned. From this state, everything aligns effortlessly. You begin to understand that desperation was never passion, urgency was never devotion. True connection does not shout, it does not beg, it does not threaten to leave if it is not immediately answered. True connection waits without waiting. Nothing needs to be fixed in them, nothing needs to be repaired between you. The only thing that ever needed adjustment was the inner agreement you made about yourself. And that agreement is changing now, quietly, without ceremony. You don't rehearse painful scenarios anymore. When the mind tries to do it out of habit, you disengage naturally, not because you force yourself, but because it no longer feels relevant. You are not that person anymore. You begin to see how powerful assumption truly is. Our entire emotional realities were once built on a single belief you accepted unconsciously. And now, As that belief dissolves, the structure built on it collapses on its own. You are not manifesting any more in the way you used to think about it. You are simply occupying a state, and states express themselves automatically. There is nothing mystical about this. It is the most natural thing in the world. Life reflects self concept. Relationships mirror identity. When identity shifts, the mirror must adjust. You stop asking if this will work. That question belonged to the old self who doubted their own authority. The new self does not debate reality. The new self allows reality to catch up. You may find yourself more present in your daily life, more grounded in ordinary moments, less mentally consumed. This presence is not a distraction from your desire, it is alignment with it. The mind no longer jumps to conclusions when something doesn't happen immediately. Delays no longer feel personal. Silence no longer feels threatening. Everything feels neutral, and neutrality is fertile ground. You are not standing still, you are standing firm. There is no pressure to think about them correctly every second. There is no penalty for human moments. What matters is the dominant state you return to, the inner posture you live from. And now, more often than not, that posture is calm, certain, and open, not grasping, not resisting, simply allowing the unfolding to continue moment by moment without needing it to resolve into a final declaration. Let this calm become familiar enough that you no longer notice it as a technique or a practice. It is simply how you move through thought now. You are no longer trying to hold on to a feeling, the feeling holds you. You start to see that the mind once believed intensity meant truth. If it hurt, it must have been real. If it was quiet, it must have been wrong. But now you recognize that truth is usually gentle. It does not shake you, it steadies you. There is a subtle confidence growing, not the loud kind that needs reassurance, but the quiet kind that doesn't argue. You don't feel the need to convince yourself anymore. Convincing belongs to uncertainty. This feels more like recognition. You may still remember the moments that once defined the story, but they no longer define you. They feel like scenes from a life you once lived, not a sentence you are still serving. Memory loses its emotional charge when identity changes. You stop asking whether you should move on or hold on. Those questions came from the belief that something could be lost. When you know nothing real can be taken from you, the question dissolves on its own. Your inner dialogue becomes simpler. Less explanation, less justification, more presence, more ease. You don't need to repeat affirmations to override fear, because fear no longer has a strong voice. When thoughts of the future appear, they feel open, not anxious. They don't demand certainty, they assume continuity. Life feels like it is moving with you rather than against you. You begin to trust the pauses, the spaces between moments, the stillness when nothing seems to be happening. You understand now that stillness is not stagnation, it is integration. There is no rush to define what this connection will look like or when it will show itself. Definitions once felt safe, now they feel unnecessary. You allow life to reveal itself instead of interrogating it. You no longer monitor your progress. You no longer wonder if you're doing it right. Those concerns belong to the version of you who believed outcomes depended on effort. This version understands that alignment expresses itself naturally. You may notice that your reactions to other people change as well. You feel less triggered, less defensive, less reactive. This is not because you care less, but because you are no longer seeking validation externally. Everything begins to feel more balanced, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just stable, and stability is what allows movement to occur without resistance. You don't need reassurance that you're on the right path. The absence of inner conflict is the confirmation. The ease in your chest is the signal. The quiet mind is the evidence. And so you remain here, not waiting, not pushing, not concluding, allowing the state to deepen, allowing identity to settle, letting the unfolding continue in its own rhythm without needing it to resolve into an ending or a declaration, simply staying present within the knowing that something fundamental has already shifted and continues to shift as you remain. Let this awareness keep expanding without labeling it as success or arrival. Labels try to freeze something that is still alive and moving. This is not a moment to capture. It is a current to stay within. You begin to sense that you no longer need constant reminders of why this works. Understanding has already settled beneath thought. You don't rehearse explanations anymore. You live from the knowing. Even when the outer world presents moments that once would have shaken you, you notice the difference now. The reaction does not take over. The mind does not spiral. There is space between stimulus and response, and in that space you remain yourself. You are no longer building your inner world around their actions or inactions. Their behavior does not determine your state. Your state determines the meaning you give to everything. That shift alone changes the entire dynamic. There is a softness in how you think about the connection now. It is not sharp with need. It is not heavy with expectation. It is gentle, familiar, unforced, like something that does not need attention to exist. You may notice that you stop mentally narrating your life so much. The inner commentary quiets, the need to explain what is happening fades. Experience becomes direct again. You don't search for signs anymore because you don't feel lost. You don't analyze synchronicities because you're no longer looking for permission to believe. Belief has become the default. At times, you might catch yourself smiling without a reason you can point to. Not because something happened, but because something settled. These moments don't demand interpretation, they simply pass through, leaving calm behind. You stop worrying about doing something wrong internally. There is no pressure to maintain perfection. The state you're in is resilient. It does not collapse because of a stray thought or a moment of doubt. You understand now that consistency is not rigidity, it is return. No matter where the mind wanders, you return to the same inner ground, and each return feels easier than the last. Life continues around you, ordinary and unremarkable on the surface, yet something underneath has reorganized. You feel less divided within yourself, less pulled in different directions, more whole. There is no need to rehearse the future or resolve the past. Both feel secondary to the present state you inhabit. From here, everything unfolds in sequence, without strain. You stay with this not because you're waiting for proof, but because it feels natural to remain. There is nothing to escape from, nothing to force, nothing to conclude, just the continued experience of being rooted in this inner alignment as it deepens quietly and carries on. Remain with the simplicity of this state, because simplicity is what the mind once overlooked while searching for answers. Nothing dramatic needs to announce itself. Nothing has to arrive with intensity to be real. You start to sense that your attention naturally returns inward instead of reaching outward, not in isolation, but in quiet self possession. You are present with yourself in a way you may not have been before, and that presence feels stabilizing. When thoughts about the connection appear, they no longer feel heavy with expectation. They feel neutral, sometimes even warm, without needing interpretation. You don't ask what they mean, you let them pass as part of the inner landscape. The urge to control outcomes weakens. Control was once mistaken for safety, but now safety comes from trust, and trust does not require constant checking. It rests. You might notice that emotional waves still rise from time to time, but they don't carry the same force. They move through you instead of pulling you under. You allow them without attaching a story, and they dissolve naturally. There's a growing sense that nothing is missing in this moment, not because everything is visible yet, but because your sense of self no longer depends on visibility. You are whole without proof. You begin to move through your days with a subtle steadiness. Conversations feel lighter, decisions feel clearer. You respond rather than react. These shifts are quiet, but they are unmistakable. You no longer rehearse explanations for why things are unfolding the way they are. Explanations once felt necessary to feel grounded. Now grounding comes from presence itself. There is no pressure to stay vigilant. You don't need to guard your thoughts or monitor your emotions. Awareness has become gentle, not strict. It observes without judgment. You trust that whatever needs to surface will surface, and whatever needs to shift will shift. You don't rush either process. Rushing belongs to fear. This belongs to knowing. The connection exists in a different way now, not as a question mark, not as an ache, but as a quiet assumption woven into your inner world. It does not demand attention. It does not fade when unattended. You stay here, allowing life to move at its own pace, letting inner alignment dare. Even through ordinary moments, remaining open, steady, and present, without shaping this experience into an ending, without turning it into a final statement, simply continuing within the unfolding as it naturally carries on. Let this sense of inner steadiness continue to stretch across your awareness without trying to define it. Definition creates edges, and what is happening now has no edges. It simply expands into more of your daily life. You may notice that you are less interested in revisiting old emotional loops, not because you are avoiding them, but because they no longer offer anything familiar or comforting. The identity that once lived there has gently stepped aside. Your thoughts begin to organize themselves around ease rather than urgency. You don't wake up scanning for emotional signals. You don't fall asleep replaying what went wrong. There is more space between thoughts, and in that space you feel intact. Even when uncertainty arises, it doesn't take root. It passes through like a brief weather change. You don't chase clarity anymore. You allow clarity to arrive when it does, knowing it always does. You start trusting your inner responses more than external cues. If something feels calm, you let it be calm. You don't question it. You don't suspect it. You accept peace without wondering when it will be taken away. This is a subtle but profound shift. Peace no longer feels temporary. It feels permissible. You may notice that your imagination changes tone. When you think of future moments, they don't carry tension. They don't require preparation. They feel open-ended, almost casual, as though life will meet you halfway without negotiation. You don't feel the need to protect yourself from disappointment. Protection once came from lowering expectations. Now it comes from knowing your inner state is not dependent on outcomes. You begin to sense the whatever unfolds will unfold from this grounded place, not from fear, not from lack. That alone changes the quality of everything that follows. The connection you care about exists within this calm, not as a problem to solve, but as something assumed into the background of your life. It does not interrupt your day, it accompanies it quietly. You stop asking yourself if you're being patient enough, strong enough, or disciplined enough. Those measurements dissolve when you are no longer striving. There is an underlying trust that you are exactly where you need to be internally, regardless of what is visible externally. This trust does not require reinforcement. It sustains itself. You remain attentive without being watchful, open without being vulnerable in a way that feels unsafe, present without waiting for something to arrive. And so this inner alignment continues to deepen through ordinary moments, through quiet thoughts, through the simple act of being yourself without tension, allowing the unfolding to carry on naturally, without pressure to end, without the need to resolve into a final understanding, just continuing steady and open as it moves forward. Allow the days to pass without assigning them meaning. A day does not have to bring evidence to be valuable. It does not have to move anything visibly to be productive. Simply remaining in this inner orientation is enough. You may notice that your sense of time changes. Hours no longer feel heavy, waiting no longer feels like waiting. Moments fill themselves without effort. This is what happens when attention is no longer fixated on an outcome. You don't feel the need to retreat from life to protect this state. You carry it with you. It moves with you through conversations, through routines, through quiet pauses. It does not require isolation. It integrates. There is less internal negotiation now, less back and forth, less convincing. You don't bargain with yourself anymore about what you deserve or what is possible. Possibility feels assumed. When the thought of them surfaces, it feels settled, almost familiar, as if the connection exists independently of your focus on it. You don't lean into the thought, you don't push it away, you let it sit where it is. You recognize that this inner stillness is not something you created through effort. It emerged when effort stopped. And because it was not forced, it does not require maintenance. You don't worry about losing this state. Worry implies fragility. This feels stable. It feels like something you return to naturally, even if the mind wanders briefly. You begin to understand that alignment is not constant awareness. It is consistent return. No matter where attention drifts, it comes back here without struggle. There is no longer a sense that something needs to be corrected inside you. You are not a problem to solve. You are a state to inhabit. Life feels less like a series of tests and more like a flow of moments that don't need interpretation. You respond when response is needed. You rest when rest is natural. You trust that movement happens in its own rhythm. The desire you once held with tension now rests lightly within you. It does not demand reassurance. It does not create pressure. It exists without urgency. You stay present with what is without denying what is becoming. You don't rush either. You don't resist either. And so you continue moving through this inner landscape with steadiness and ease, allowing awareness to remain open, allowing identity to stabilize, letting the unfolding progress naturally without shaping it into an ending, without drawing a final line, simply remaining within the ongoing experience as it continues forward. Notice how your perception of them begins to change without effort. You no longer see them as distant or unavailable. You no longer measure interactions or silence as indicators of worth. Instead, you feel the connection as a subtle certainty underlying everything, independent of outer appearances. You may find that the old urge to check, to analyze, to anticipate has almost disappeared. That part of you that once lived in doubt is quiet now. It whispers occasionally, but it no longer commands attention. You respond calmly, almost automatically, with the posture of knowing rather than hoping. Even when life presents obstacles, they no longer feel threatening. Challenges no longer provoke panic or despair. You meet them with steadiness, with a grounded sense that the inner shift has already determined the outer expression. The external is secondary to what you maintain within. Your imagination becomes a place of calm rehearsal rather than anxious projection. When you imagine moments with them, you do not strain to force outcomes. You allow the scenarios to feel natural, as if they are already taking place in a timeless space where outcomes do not need proof. You notice how others interact with you differently, not because you have changed their minds, but because you have changed yourself. Presence attracts without effort. Ease radiates naturally. The inner state you occupy influences the environment quietly, subtly, inevitably. You stop thinking in terms of waiting or longing. Waiting implies absence. Longing implies lack. Instead, you occupy the state of completion. You carry the version of reality you desire with calm certainty, and everything that appears in the outer world must eventually align with it. Doubt may surface occasionally, but it no longer has the power to destabilize. You recognize it for what it is, a fleeting echo of old assumptions that no longer belong to you. You don't resist it, you simply earn to the natural state effortlessly, without judgment. You may begin to notice that peace itself becomes a sign. You don't need messages, interactions, or confirmations to validate your assumption. The inner quiet, the unshakable calm, the sense of being complete without anything outside is enough. And so the process continues. The inner posture deepens. The sense of being chosen and remembered grows more natural. The unfolding occurs silently, invisibly, yet inevitably, as you remain rooted in certainty, carrying forward the inner knowing that everything necessary is already present, allowing reality to reflect what has already shifted within, without haste, without tension, without pause, continuously. So now, remember this above all else. Your specific person is not lost, and your connection is not broken. Nothing in the outer world has the power to override the certainty you hold within. Stop giving energy to doubt. Stop chasing signs. Stop measuring time. The love, the desire, the connection you feel is already alive inside you, and the moment you refuse to vacillate, the world has no choice but to catch up. Stand firm in the knowing, hold your state with calm confidence, and never, ever give up. What you assume as real, you will experience as real, because the only force stronger than time, distance, and circumstance is the certainty of your consciousness. Stay steady, remain certain, and watch as everything aligns to prove that giving up was never an option.